Hi everyone and welcome back to my channel. So today I'm going to show you all the books that I read in February, and if I'm remembering correctly, I guess I need to check now. I read 9 books in February, which is not a bad reading month. I felt like I was doing it kind of slow, or I would do it in spurts and then have days in between where I just wasn't getting much reading done, but you know, that's okay. 9 books, I'm pretty happy with that. Not that it matters how much you read, but I already did a mid-month wrap-up, which you should be able to find, but I will link that video below, and I will just quickly tell you about all the books that I read this month, but the ones in the first half that I already did a video on, I'm just going to tell you or show you and not really give you my thoughts on it because I already did that. And then the second half of the video will be the books that I read in the last half, and then I will give my thoughts on those. Alright, I need my phone for this so I can just check it out, but the first book that I read this month was Anastasia by Vladimir Megre, which is a Russian translated novel that was sort of strange, and I still don't know exactly what to think about it, and you can get more of my thoughts on that in the mid-month wrap-up video. But yeah, if you guys have heard of the Ringing Cedar series, again, I'm going to put the call out there. If any of you have heard of it, I would be curious to hear your thoughts on it. The next book that I read this month was Big Red by Jim Kjelgaard, which was a classic dog story. And then the next book that I read was Farewell to Manzanar by Jeanne Wakatsuki Houston, which was a memoir, a true memoir, and I don't know why I'm holding it like this, which was a true memoir about a girl and what life was like for her growing up during World War II and being a Japanese American and being forced to go live in an internment camp. The next book I read was The Book of the Dung Cow by Walter Wangerin Jr., which was, again, I didn't know exactly what to think of this book, and I still feel, yeah, about it, but yeah, if anyone, again, I'm putting the call out, if anyone has read this book, love to hear your thoughts on it. Another book that I read this month was Crossing to Avalon by Shinoda Bolen, and this was a nonfiction book about a woman who sort of takes a midlife crisis type pilgrimage over to Europe and just visits like goddess pagan type sites and just like the quest for the goddess within herself, I guess. And this was a pretty good book. I like this for what it was. Okay, all those books I just showed you were the ones that I read in the first part of the month, and then the next ones I'm going to show you are ones that I have finished in the second half of the month. And the first one I'm going to show you is Enemy Women by Paulette Jiles, and if you recall, and I will link to that video if you're interested in watching it, but this is my TBR jar pick that my faithful and loyal chicken Alicia picked for me. And this was a fictional novel set in the Civil War, and Enemy Women, it was about, I guess, women in the Civil War who were imprisoned by the Union Army or militia, I can't remember exactly, you know, just for being enemies of the United States, like helping the Confederate soldiers, which a lot of times were their families, so you can't really blame them for helping a father or a brother or a husband, but women were in prison for this. And what I liked was in the beginning of chapters, there were true, like, letters and accounts of the stuff that was going on before the chapter would start, so you got a little bit of history in there, and with this, but what this was about was a girl who's 17 years old named Adair, and she gets arrested and sent to one of these women's prisons, but in the course of being sent there, she falls in love with a Union officer, and he falls in love with her, and then all the stuff that goes with that. Whoa, I'm gonna drop it. This was a pretty good book. The main issue that I had with this book is there was no punctuation, so sometimes, actually, a lot of the times I had to go back and reread because I wasn't aware that someone was talking until after I'd read it. And even then I had to kind of go decipher like who was talking. So I had to reread a lot of this, which wasn't very fun. So I can't remember if I gave this 3 or 4 stars. The story was pretty good, but the grammar stuff, or not the grammar stuff, but the punctuation stuff just kind of got on my nerves a little bit. I got used to reading it and I got better at it, but I don't know why that there weren't punctuation marks. Alright, the next book I read I don't have on me, but that was How to Raise a Wild Child by Scott D. Sampson. And I don't have it because I just lent it out to a friend who's really interested in reading it, but I think I included it in my last video if you want to see the cover. But this was just a nonfiction book, sort of a parenting book, I guess, which I don't like parenting books usually. Actually, I hate them usually because they just seem just preachy and arrogant, and yeah. But this one wasn't that for me. I enjoy reading about kids and nature and just how to tackle the problem of growing like technology age and kids being glued to screens and stuff, which is what this book was about. If you aren't familiar with Scott D. Sampson, I didn't know this until I bought the book, but he was actually involved with Dinosaur Train. If you're a parent with kids, maybe you know about Dinosaur Train, the cartoon, but he was, I guess, the scientist that they consulted to help make the show, and then he appears at the end of every episode telling kids to go outside and make their own discoveries. I thought that was pretty neat, not that I bought the book for that reason. But what I liked about the book was that he did not ignore that there are kids who live in more urban environments, who live in the city, who, you know, it's going to be harder for them to go outside and experience nature the way that a lot of these books, like this one that I read, tell you to do. And I know a lot of people probably get frustrated with that because they're like, we live in a city, we don't even have a yard, how are we supposed to experience nature? And he does address that, and then he gives ideas on how to tackle that. And before reading this book, I didn't know there were so many nature clubs or groups. I mean, outside of Boy Scouts and Girl Scouts, like there are real like back to nature clubs and stuff that you can join, which I think is really cool. But I want to read something. I had took a photo of it from the book, and I wanted to read it to you guys because this stuck out to me from the very beginning. I think this was just a few pages in, and then I knew I was gonna get totally sucked into this book, but it was kind of scary. What it said that really caught my attention was, most boys rack up more than 10,000 gaming hours before age 21. Children can now recognize greater than 1,000 corporate logos, but fewer than 10 plants native to their region. And I don't know about you guys, but that just totally like is jarring for me and very disturbing. I recognize that issue in my own self. I think it was 2 years ago or so, I realized that I could not walk out my front door and immediately identify 5 plants growing in my own yard. And I grew up in this region for my whole life. And then I can't go outside and recognize just 5 common plants just stepping out my front door. I consider that a huge issue. You know, once upon a time, our lives depended on recognizing plants and stuff. And I still think, to an extent, our life does depend on that. And we shouldn't just ignore these real skills that I feel like we still need to have as human beings. This is what we were built for. We are supposed to know some of this stuff, and that we don't, and that our kids don't, and grow up never knowing that. Just, it makes me sad and it disturbs me. So I really like that book, and I think it had great ideas in it, and I highly suggest it if you want to kind of tackle the growing trend of screens and indoor time, and you need ideas on how to make both of those things feasible at the same time, and how kids can still be in today's world of technology but still have that knowledge and love and wonder and awe of nature, which we are still a part of, even though we try to think we aren't. So alright, and technically the last book that I read this month, which I finished the 28th at night, was 1984 by George Orwell. I guess if you aren't familiar with this, this is the same guy that wrote Animal Farm, which I have read and highly enjoyed. But this, I guess, is some people consider it the original science fiction dystopian novel. I don't know. I'm not familiar enough with those types of books to really know if that's a true statement or not, but this was pretty cool. If you can guess, the year in this book is 1984, which is way ahead in the future when all this crazy technology and bad stuff is going down. But I kind of liked reading about that because I could easily picture the stuff he was describing in here, whereas when I read other novels that are set in the far future that are more modern ones, I have a hard time sometimes picturing the technology that they're talking about. But maybe that's just a problem. Maybe that's just my own problem. Maybe that's not a thing or whatever. I don't really want to talk too much about this book because I went into it pretty blind other than what I've already said. The only thing I ever heard about it was from people on BookTube and then from my librarians saying that they want to read this book because they felt it was appropriate for the time period that we're in. And that really got my curiosity, like tickled my curiosity in my brain, and I want to pick it up. And again, I just went into it not knowing a whole lot, and I really enjoyed it. I think I gave it 4 stars on Goodreads, if that means anything to you. But the only negative thing, which isn't a negative thing that I have to say about this book, is I did enjoy Animal Farm better. I liked Animal Farm better than this book, but this one was still good. Alright, so those were technically all the books that I read in February. But I'm just going to go ahead and show you one that I have already completed in March, and that would be Fawn in the Forest by Jim Kjelgaard. I actually just finished it this morning on March 1st. I was trying to finish it last night, but I fell asleep reading it. But I'm still going to include it in this video because, I mean, I started in February and just finished it on March 1st, so why not? But what this was just a collection of nature stories written from the perspective of different animals. And it was just a fun, like, light read for me. Just the kind of stories that I like picking up if I need something to keep my mind busy, but nothing too heavy or dense or hard to get into. And just the short stories were really nice to read. So that was my February wrap-up and all the books that I read this month. And again, if you want to see more of my thoughts on the first half of the books that I showed you, I made a mid-month wrap-up video that you can go check out. But I hope you guys enjoyed watching, and if you have read any of these, you know, I'd love to hear your thoughts on them, and just share with me what you read this month. I'm always looking for reading ideas. I hope you guys have a great day, and I will see you again soon.